order. Just a quick roll call attendance.
Woody Chittick here.
Lee Darst
She was present. She just stepped
We'll go
away.
back to her. Michael Dickey,
Here.
Charlie Higginson,
Charlie, here.
Dave McMorris here, Matt Watkins,
Here.
and we'll go back to Lee in a minute. I guess the first item on our agenda tonight is a continued hearing for 82 Border Street for a use special permit and special permit. I see that Mr. Brodsky is with us. I assume you will be leading the discussion for the applicants, and Mr. Omar has been promoted, Ms. Hoadley, and Lee Darst. I have to say, I'm here.
I'm here.
Thank you. So, and Ms. Martinez is here as well, Mr. Sullivan. We're also joined by John Hallen to discuss some of the issues. And Mr. Brodsky, if you want to start, I noticed we've got a lot of new material since the last meeting, some of it extremely new as of yesterday. But why don't you give us a little overview of what the applicant has caught up with since the last hearing.
Thank you, Chair McMorris. Again, good evening. My name is Adam Brodsky. I hope you had a good holiday, and I represent Co-Lobster LLC. I say thank you for promoting Ms. Reese. Mr. Sullivan, as you know, is the manager of the LLC. Eamon O'Mara is our project manager. Susan Hoadley and Corinna Martinez of HMA Architects are architects. Caroline Reese is our registered professional engineer from Merrill. And I do know that we do have Nino DeNuno from DeNuno Construction, the general contractor, available if we need to promote him. And I apologize to the board for not attending the November 12 hearing. That was our third public hearing, and candidly, I thought we were moving towards closing the public hearing and getting a decision, because at that point in time, I thought we had addressed all of the substantive questions from the board, but I was provided with a list of additional information which the board requested, which we addressed in our November 25th submittal. That same day, Ms. Gillis provided me with Mr. Chittick's deep dive memo. It's just before Thanksgiving. Many of Mr. Chittick's questions were actually addressed in the November 25th submittal. However, we worked as quickly as we could, given the holiday, to provide a point-by-point response, which, as Chair McMorris indicated, we were only able to get to you yesterday. That's simply the best we could do, given the time frame and the intervening holiday. So I will do my best to provide a quick overview, and then obviously make our subject matter experts available for your questions. I believe we were asked to explain why we were elevating the main end and Eastwick buildings. As the board will recall, those are located within the FEMA AE elevation 11 flood zone, and presently don't comply with the flood resistant construction requirements in the 9th Massachusetts Building Code. Under the code, the lowest floor should be elevated above the base flood elevation, that's elevation 11 based upon the FEMA map, plus 1 foot. 11 plus 1 foot is 12 feet. That's commonly referred to as the design flood elevation. The main inn, the lowest floor of the main inn, is at elevation 8.7, and the Eastwick inn is at 8.9. So we were proposing to elevate those buildings originally to comply with the 9th Massachusetts Building Code. We're not proposing to change the dimensions of those buildings. We're not proposing to create any additional area or square footage. The proposal is simply to elevate those to comply with the building code for flood resiliency. I understand that during the permitting process, Merrill was advised, I believe it was by Mr. Hallen, to ask us to comply with the 10th Massachusetts Building Code. So the 10th Massachusetts Building Code became effective in October of this year, but it actually runs concurrently with the 9th edition Building Code. And that's presently, the concurrence period runs through, I think, January, February of 2025. Although I think the board is meeting tomorrow to propose extending that into June of next year. I think there's a typo in my letter. I mentioned June 2024. In fact,
Yes.
the concurrency period is June 2025. Under the 10th Massachusetts Building Code, the design flood elevation is the base flood elevation 11 plus 2 feet. So it would require to comply with elevation 13, 11 plus 2, elevation 13. Here's where it gets a little bit complicated. This project is going to be subject to state review under the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, because as I think you know, we have portions of the site which are subject to Chapter 91 jurisdiction. And so Massachusetts in 2023 adopted the State Hazard and Climate Adaptation Plan. It's referred to as Resilient MA. And what that does is it requires projects which require state permits to consider adaptation and resiliency for future sea level rise and storm surge. So Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management has created a design tool which models the 1% storm, the 100-year storm for the year 2070. So Merrill performed that calculation, and that results in an elevation of 13.8 for our project. In fact, we need to add an additional 0.8 feet. So if I've done this correctly, and I stand to be corrected, we need to add 0.8 feet to our design flood elevation under the 10th Massachusetts Building Code, which was rounded up to elevation 11. So it's 11 plus 2 plus 1 equals 14, which is why the first floor elevation was ultimately increased to elevation 14, which was a total increase of 3 feet above the base flood elevation. I know that there was discussion reference to a change of 1 foot. That's the change of the design flood elevation from the 9th Massachusetts Building Code to the 10th Building Code. But what I think the subtlety was is that there's an additional foot that needed to be included in order to comply with the Resilient MA standards. I know that Caroline can take you through that design tool. We actually gave you that printout in our submittal. The second critical issue were questions regarding lot and structural coverage. And I'm going to thank Mr. Chittick for reminding me that the Waterfront Business District is now the Harbor District. I will eventually get this all correct. However, the dimensional requirements in the new Harbor District have not changed. There is a maximum lot coverage requirement of 80%. There is no requirement for building coverage or structural coverage. Regardless, to provide as much information as possible, Merrill did provide all 3 calculations, and we refer you to Merrill's November 2024 response. And we also provided an updated zoning table on the site layout plan, which was revised also as of November 2024. And we were asked, or someone was asked to update the zoning application, which we did to reflect that. I know that Mr. Chittick pointed out that lot area is defined differently than lot coverage in the zoning bylaws. I candidly don't know if that was intended by town meeting or was a result of serial changes to the bylaws over the years. I don't have enough information regarding that. We calculated lot coverage using the bylaw definition and used a total lot area of 27,033 square feet, which by definition includes 50% of the water bodies. This is entirely consistent with how lot coverage has been calculated for other projects on the harbor, as far as we know. I do note that the definition of lot coverage makes no distinction between tidal and non-tidal water bodies, so it's not addressed in the zoning bylaw. We are reducing lot coverage from existing conditions, which results in a net improvement, which I know that Caroline has described previously. We've also, throughout the review of this project, accounted for all impervious surfaces in our calculations. It's done by typical groups. Mr. Chittick did request an item-by-item data sheet, which my team tells me has never been asked for before, but we're happy to provide that information. And regardless, if you look at the item-by-item list, all of the numbers, and again, accurately reflects the breakdown of lot coverage. So that's contained in Merrill's lot coverage breakdown dated November 26, 2024. There was, I think appropriately, some question regarding the calculation of facade area and building volume setback. I do want to defend my team, because all of the calculations in the building calculation sheet, which goes back to October 8th, were mathematically correct. However, we didn't do a very good job of explaining our methodology. So what we did is we relabeled our charts and added an additional column, which we hope gets to the heart of Mr. Chittick's concerns. So the building calculations were revised as of November 21, 2024, and they reflect the following categories: existing non-conforming structure, proposed non-conforming structure, and here we've added a third column, which we've labeled difference percent change. That's the difference between the existing non-conformity and the proposed non-conformity as a percentage, which I believe is what Mr. Chittick was looking for, the difference between existing non-conformity and proposed non-conformity, so you can compare those two. The fourth column is labeled percent change with a reference to a formula. And that was the original number that was submitted. And what that is the total of the existing non-conformity, the proposed non-conformity, and the existing conforming structure expressed as a percentage. That's why it was confusing, which resulted in numbers greater than 100%, because and we provided you with the actual formula that architects use to create that. But hopefully we've captured what Mr. Chittick was looking for, and all of the math was double checked again and verified by our professionals. Now, I want to make clear the facade and building volume charts don't include the new building. So this is the new building that's intended to replace the boathouse, which is going to be raised, because that structure is conforming. We're not asking for any dimensional relief. And so it's not included in those charts. So we don't need a special permit other than a special permit for construction in the floodplain. However, if you look at that chart, the calculation of gross building area does include the new building. And I should point out that the new building has always conformed to the 10th building code, because it's elevated to such a degree, it's got parking beneath. So all of the essentially the structure is above the design flood elevation for that floodplain. There have been no volumetric changes to the new building throughout this project. There were some cosmetic changes and material changes made with respect to its appearance. And again, Susan and Corinna can go through this again in more detail. Parking during storm events. So I need to make clear that the project has always had compliant on-site parking. However, during the site plan review process, the planning board asked us to provide an emergency plan that would remove any vehicles that remained on the property during a major storm event. So if for some reason we had a guest at the hotel and they had not moved their car, we had a major storm event coming in, we have a plan in order to remove that. That was developed for the planning board and actually is incorporated into the final site plan approval as a condition. I provided you with a copy of that condition, which we proposed to the planning board, which was adopted in its entirety. It was never a zoning issue. It was a public safety issue. Because we have compliant parking, we never needed to refer to the off-site parking requirements under section 7.2, which, says, hey, listen, if I don't have parking on my site, I might be able to get, the required zoning parking, under other sections of the bylaw. We're not proposing to use any off-site parking. This is a temporary plan during storm events. I'm not sure I understood the issue regarding long-term rentals. So I do recall, and I thought it was during the planning board, that there was a abutter that raised some concern about guests staying a long time at the hotel and some concern about long-term rentals. Most towns want long-term rentals, which they view more favorably than short-term rentals. All of the heat and lightning that I see with respect to towns is, what are we going to do with these short-term rentals? They turn over, they could provide problems for neighbors. We're seeking a special permit for transient lodging accommodations, which is defined as the letting of rooms for transient occupancy in a licensed hotel, motel, or inn. There's no definition of transient occupancy, but I found a case that sort of defines transient as rentals of 30 days or less. I don't know if the ZBA can regulate this issue if it's not specifically addressed in the bylaws, but I'm going to respectfully suggest there's no good reason to prevent longer term rentals. I think the concern was somehow that if there was a long-term rental, it would take a hotel room out of circulation for some period of time. It's simply not a zoning issue. But again, I may not understand that issue.
Yeah, Adam, I don't believe that was raised at our meeting at all.
All right, thank you. That was
Must have been another
forwarded to me.
board. The issue that was raised here by a resident had more to do with the potential future conversion to condominiums. And, our response was, that's not before us. And if it ever was, it would be a whole new permitting process. And so it's really not something we're discussing right now.
Thank you. Well, then I spent a great deal of time and thought thinking about long-term versus short-term rental. We are prepared tonight to go through Mr. Chittick's deep dive list. I think I hit most of the major points. I should note that we did provide a complete set of the plans, which incorporated the civil site plans and the landscape plans. They were provided separately at one point, even though there was an index on the site plan to include them. So you should have a complete copy, and that plan set is dated November 2024.
Okay,
So,
Adam, I have a question on that.
Yes, sir.
I can't find a copy of the elevations of the new buildings since the first set of plans. So the only ones that I have are showing what the original, the original application before these additional height things came in. And the other thing I can't find is, what is the height of the new building?
I'm happy to defer to Susan and Corinna. Could I just finish my spiel and then we'll answer your
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, well, I just wanted to bring you up to speed.
That's what you get for taking a breath.
I struggled with coming up with a short presentation tonight. I tried to do it. There's just so much to do. I just want to let you know that the Conservation Commission has issued an order of conditions approving the project. The planning board has issued its site plan approval. That decision is filed with the town clerk. And as you know, we need special permits for use, extending various nonconformities, and for activities in the floodplain. And if you just give me a minute, because I just want to try to refocus on why we're here, if I could. because I began working on this project in 2022. We went through an extensive process with DEP to square away the complicated waterways issues on this site. It's been a difficult site to develop, given its constraints. And then we had a false start in 2023 last year, but we really spent a lot of time early this year refining the project, consulting with the various boards, and finally we're prepared to present to the boards at the end of the summer. Just as a personal note, I ride by this site on my bicycle nearly every week, and I've been doing so for the last 30 years. I mean, the property has been, I think, underutilized. And I think we have an opportunity here to permit a viable commercial project, which we've taken great care to design, not only to meet the zoning bylaw and the town's design standards to the extent they apply, but also to do it to address climate resiliency for the future. And the upshot of that is that we have the ability to open up this site for public access, which has not existed for, I don't know if it's decades or much more long that. And we have a client who's willing to pay the freight to do all of this. So I just wanted to remind the board that I think we have an opportunity here that I'm going to do my best not to squander and to try and get this through. So I just wanted to share that with you. I did notice, thank you for promoting Carol Lamb. She's our landscape architect and she's here this evening. So back to your questions. I'm certain we've provided updated architecturals, and I'll leave that question to Susan and Corinna. Thank you.
Chairman McMorris, you can find the new building elevations on our second submission, and the drawing sheet is dated 26 August 24.
Okay, what page?
What's the sheet number?
The sheet number is A112
On 12, yeah.
ZBA. You could share it. And I have it on my screen.
Yeah. I have that sheet. This is Woody Chittick speaking, but
Part of the problem is that my set of plans here, the last page is A111.
oh,
Does anyone else have that issue? Any other board members? Or do you all have A112? Okay, well, I can see it from that you put it up here, so.
We show that we're calling the bottom of the cupola the highest point of the roof line, which is at 33 feet. And then the top of the cupola we have at elevation 39.9. And then the area of the cupola is less than 5% of the total roof area.
I would have a suggestion for the future, not for this project, but I think it would be useful. You've done it correctly. You've gone to the pre-construction grade and gone up. It would be useful though to have a line that shows the post-construction or the finished grade, if you will, to the roof. Not because the bylaw requires it, but it does help if we need to compare, pre and post existing. in the event that a building is being changed, you know, either volumetrically or from a height standpoint. But it's not a requirement, but it just would make comparisons a little easier, I think.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Because the first number that jumps out is that this building is very tall. Well, you've moved it up. That's why. I mean, you haven't changed the building height as much as you've changed the base point.
This particular one is a new building. And
Yeah.
Did you say, what's the height to the bottom of the cupola?
We've measured at pre-construction grade,
Right,
which is this line right here,
yep.
up to the bottom of the cupola as the
Mhm.
high point of the roof.
And that's what, how much, what's the
And
number?
that's 33 feet.
33, okay.
And then the top of the cupola is 39, 9 inches.
Dave, I think one of the things the board ought to discuss, however briefly, is if you're building a new building, a replacement building, and you're not really enlarging the height per se, but the base point goes up considerably, is that, you know, I mean, technically this building is taller than, no, it isn't really, is it? It's okay in terms of height. The height is
Yeah.
35 feet in this district for a conforming building.
Right. Is the cupola necessary?
For proper ventilation,
Yeah, we're trying to use passive ventilation as much as we possibly can in these buildings to be green. And that, we do think that, that cupola is necessary to that strategy.
And unless I'm mistaken, it's a permitted projection that meets the requirements of the
That's
bylaw.
true, but I'm thinking that you also have two other buildings that are over height in a fairly sensitive area of town.
Chair McMorris, I don't recall any of the abutters complaining about the heights of these buildings. In fact, I think there's been universal support.
I don't know that one way or the other, and it really doesn't matter. You know, if people were complaining about it, it would be important. The fact that they're not complaining about it doesn't change our job. Okay. So where are the new elevations of the other two buildings?
On which pages?
are you referring to the main inn and
The
the,
main inn and the Eastwick Inn?
We can share those.
I can share. Okay. Can you see my screen? Can you see the Eastwick building right now?
Yeah, see, I think, yeah, those pages I have, that's 110. 542.
The sheets I'm sharing are dated October 7th. Because they represent the new floor elevation 14.
And when did we get those?
They were part of our third resubmission. And the date was October 7th. Or close to that.
Dave, are we as a board open to ask a question or not?
Yes, we are. Let me just get this. Okay.
This is sort of carving, new ground in a way for the board in terms of elevations and height. And I'm not saying that anything has been done wrong here, but we haven't dealt with height, which is kind of literally put in as the vertical distance from the lower of the pre-construction grade, whichever, or finished, whichever is lower, and the highest point of any structure. But it doesn't deal with raising buildings to comply with state or federal requirements. It's sort of an absolute definition. And I think the board should think about it and talk about it a little bit at some appropriate point in the hearing
Yeah,
as to how we handle that. I mean, do we, it'd be perfectly reasonable to go either way, to say we'll ignore the piling piece because it has to be done, or the piling piece is really part of overall height.
Yeah, I don't think there's any discretion there, Woody. I think, the bylaw says where we measure from and to, and it tells us what the maximum height is. So unless the town wants to consider bylaw changes to accommodate, elevating buildings in the flood zone, we're going to be hamstrung. I think in this particular case, it's, I guess, fortuitous that they're already non-conforming buildings.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
3 of the
well-
4 3 are existing. The new building, the whatever it's called, the new building, I guess, is new.
But it's also
That could be
conforming,
made to comply.
but it's conforming even on the pilings.
It was,
Yeah.
excuse me, Chair McMorris, it's Adam Brodsky. The new building was designed to comply with the most stringent flood-resistant construction requirements. That's actually in a more stringent flood zone. And so from the very beginning, we knew we needed to do that. And that informed the design of the building, which is why it's got parking below.
Actually, what I'd like to do, Woody, before we go to the board, actually, Mr. Brodsky, do you have anything that you or any of the team wants to add?
No, sir. I mean, we're happy to answer any questions you have. I didn't think it worth going through all line by line, of Mr. Chittick's deep dive, but I hit the key points.
Okay. Well, let me just ask Mr. Hallen, can you comment for us on the changes in the building code and the flood resiliency
Chapter 91.
70 goals and what the importance of them are? I guess first of all, what is mandatory and what is discretionary? And if something is discretionary, why it's a good or a bad idea?
Yeah, the 10th edition of the building code is mandatory. So that foot that he spoke about earlier, going from the 9th to the 10th, that's in the building code. The other portion of it on chapter 91, they do address that as mandatory too, as far as what they're planning for the future to the raise. Due to the uniqueness of the floodplain and jurisdiction, it is difficult to apply the existing height definition because depending on where the elevation is in the floodplain, you could eliminate 10 to 15 feet of the building right off the bat just because of there. So I think the board was probably correct in kind of looking at it as a two-story structure in the floodplain and giving that the consideration needed to be. But the discretion in the elevation is really none. It dictates what it is, and that if you want to build in the floodplain, here's the height you have to be. If you want to apply for a Chapter 91 license, here are the regulations you have to follow, and they don't really give you. There's no jurisdiction to override that.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. Anyone from the board? Woody, you're the quarterback on this. Do you want to ask some questions?
I got a fewer than I had a week or so ago. But first, I'd like to say part of my problems have with this application have not been with the essence of it, but it's been with data that is sometimes confusing to interpret or not available. And I'll mention one or two anomalies in the data that I think we should get squared away. It's not in my estimation, a verdict of death here at all, but it's really an attempt to make sure that any successors to any of us can look at a plan or plans and understand the data that goes with them. So with that being said, first, Adam, just kind of across the Zoom link, I was wrong on the calculation of lot area. You were right. It is certainly Merrill's methodology is correct, taking 100% of the land above mean high water and 50% of it below. And so the 27,000 and change lot coverage is no issue for me. So I stand corrected. I do have a concern, or at least I'd like an explanation for lot coverage, though. I think we would all agree that there are three coverage definitions in the bylaws, and depending on the zone and so on and so forth, 1, 2, or maybe all three apply. The narrowest definition is building coverage. That doesn't apply in this case. The next sort of intermediate coverage issue is structural, which is sort of man-made structures giving support, which is more than just a building. It could be a tennis court, it could be a swimming pool or patio or something like that. And the third and the most expansive is lot coverage, which is coverage by any man-made materials, impervious coverage. I think we'd all agree that imperviosity here is the operative base point. But I went to Merrill's 20th of November, I don't know what you call it, memo, I guess, on pages 2 and 3. And yeah, the data sort of agrees, except in one place. And Adam, maybe you can help me or your colleagues can. When it comes to structural coverage, which is a little less expansive than lot coverage, Merrill has listed deck and steps at 5,609 square feet and a captain's walk at 1,578. And there's no disagreement in terms of a retaining wall or flagpole. Those two items agree in both calculations. But basically, Merrill has said structural coverage includes 7,187 square feet of kind of non-building, non-flagpole kind of items. That's 7,000, almost 200. But when they go to lot coverage, which should include sweep in more things such as a paved walkway, etc., it's 6,000 square feet. So from 7,200, lot coverage shrinks by 1,800 square feet. So this is why I wanted to see a more detailed listing of the elements, to be sure that it wasn't just to be sure that there's double counting, but to be sure that everything, that we have apples and apples together. And if something is being added, we can tell, okay, that's a de minimis thing, but I don't understand how lot coverage is less than structural coverage. Can someone help me out on that?
Would you, Caroline Reese, would you like me to jump in?
Sure.
Sure. Woody, did you get the lot coverage area breakdown table that we submitted? I can share it on the screen. I think if I share the screen, it shows it. I mean, we provided a definition of lot area coverage as impervious area.
Right.
We're basically increasing impervious on site. with the captain's walk and the deck stairs and that little seating area. And, you know, the captain's walk is, I think, about 1,600 square feet.
Right.
That used to be pavement. So what counted as lot area is now switching into structural coverage area. If
I
may
don't follow
share-
you. A
Let
lot,
me share my screen.
yeah, let me see, because lot has to include all structures that are impervious.
Correct.
Oh, you're saying you've got a pervious structure.
Yes, we have more impervious structure, namely that captain's walk over land is a majority of it.
No,
That's
more pervious, not impervious.
more pervious, correct. But that would be structure because it's a raised walkway and ramp. So that's where the discrepancy, I think, lies. And I apologize if I didn't explain that clearly. If you'd like me to share the screen. So we tried to, let's see, can everyone see my screen? Really break down the numbers in the table. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
So this was the handout. So these are impervious areas that went into lot coverage is the second. I think building coverage we're okay with. The impervious areas are added in here. And then we have, for structural coverage, it's mostly the, oh, this is all lot coverage breakdown. But what happens with the structural coverage is we lose some pavement. And part of that's replaced by the captain's walk, which is about 1,600 square feet of the difference. And then maybe the pervious seating wall where it's over land and not retaining wall, some of the steps down. So basically that gets you the 2,000 square feet difference from this lot coverage area breakdown to structural coverage. Does that make sense? Am I confusing it?
Well, you've under structural coverage, you've included pervious
Correct.
structures, such as a deck that's, got spaces between it, et cetera.
Exactly.
And we have typically taken, assumed that structures mean impervious. So I can see how if you're adding treating a captain's walk, I was confused because some testimony said it was impervious, some said it was pervious. So that's why the difference between structural coverage and lot coverage actually decreases, which
Exactly.
didn't make any sense to me when I've
Okay.
tried to understand it.
Sure. I hope if you've seen this letter, we kind of break it down on how we defined it overall. And those were the numbers that support lot coverage, which is just the impervious area, but we have lot coverage.
Okay. Well, I guess that
Is that
that's just yeah, it's a
Sure.
matter of what you included, and I wasn't aware. That's why I think it might have been helpful from the get-go if we had a little more detail here. And you'd put captain's walk in one column and then have a big zero on the next column. We could either ask the question or it would be obvious to us.
sure?
But it wasn't because it was subsumed under a general heading.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, that was one issue. It also didn't exactly jump out at me, and this is maybe my problem. And I don't think it's a landscaping issue, but the boathouse itself is changing the boathouse is non-conforming in fairly large part and today, and it will be replaced by a conforming building called new building. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
It wasn't entirely clear to me at the start, and that's I'll take the blame for just being a little slow on that. And that's why the boathouse doesn't show up, or whatever the new building. I've got a question about that, but it doesn't show up in the schedule of building calculations per se, because it's a conforming building. So you would, by definition, not have any intrusion into the setback. But I would like Hoadley Martinez to maybe relook at one of their submissions, which is sheet AS 104, which is site signage, and it's not worth belaboring here tonight, but the new inn building is depicted as ever so slightly intruding into the setback. That doesn't square with more detailed Hoadley Martinez drawings, which shows that it's perfectly conforming. You ought to change that.
Okay, for the purposes of that drawing, I certainly will.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sense to have, I mean, because it represents a dichotomy, that a false dichotomy. You're not.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Chick, my understanding was that there was a request for informational purposes to provide a signing package, which would be permitted separately.
Oh,
So
well,
that-
that's fine, but Adam, I'm only saying that on this sheet 104, this shows the new inn building as being in the setback
Yes,
by
sir.
a bit. That isn't your intention, I believe.
No, sir.
No,
So it's, I would make it, my recommendation is change that particular sheet so we don't, or somebody doesn't have an ambiguity going on there.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so it becomes conforming. Parking, I would agree with you, Adam, that it's a public safety issue. It's not part of Section 7 in the bylaws, so it would be nice to have an agreement, and certainly, as you suggest, if a decision should be filed in our, appended to our decision, that the planning board is indicated. Okay. I think the only other issue I had, okay, so the captain's is going to be pervious, correct?
Correct.
We get that, okay. I think most everything else, oh, why on the table, and again, these are questions, sheet CA, underlines ZBA, which has to do with facade areas and building volumes all in the setback. You list as a gross building area, the new building second level at 901 square feet. What about the first level? That's part of a gross building area as well. And shouldn't that table include it? It's not material in terms of how we make a decision, but I think the data that you're preparing and submitting should be complete.
We can certainly add it. We usually don't add areas when they're not conditioned.
So, Mr. Chittick,
Totally
beneath,
closed.
it's parking beneath that building. That building is elevated up on pilings, and there's parking below, so there's no conditioned space below.
No what space?
Conditioned space, so it's just parking beneath. So,
Well, yeah, but it is certainly part of the gross floor area, right?
Okay, we can add that.
We can
The
certainly.
total floor area of a building. It doesn't say of a habitable structure or something, of a building measured from the exterior faces of the exterior walls.
but there are no exterior walls. That's all open.
I see doors.
Oh, there's skirting, and I would agree, Woody, that we should probably add that lower area just as an enclosure.
I mean, do the doors close? Could you lock them if you had to?
They open and close.
Well, that's to my mind, a wall as much as anything.
Okay. We'll add that.
The last issue, Dave, I had, and I think it's again worth discussing a little bit, is the function of the gatehouse. I raised to the applicants through Adam a concern that is it right to say that all four buildings on this site are principal buildings, as opposed to the gatehouse, which is to house the attendant or the single employee? Is that an accessory? building, and I don't have a firm answer. I'd like to hear from my colleagues and the applicants themselves, but the definition of an accessory building is a detached subordinate building. Okay, it's detached. The use of which is customarily incidental and subordinate to that of the principal building, and which is located on the same lot. And I would have to say the principal buildings, 3, are principal because they all are function as part of a hotel complex or mini complex for paying guests and various amenities. And I would think this might be considered an incidental and subordinate use to that of the main buildings, which would make it accessory. The only reason I bring up accessory is that there's a 25-foot height limit on accessory structures. This would exceed it by a couple of feet. But it's more the principle of the thing. I mean, is this principle? I don't mean to use the word in 2 different meanings. Is this a principal building for a hotel complex, or is it really incidental and subordinate to that because maybe the employee does not have to live on site? I don't know. The Red Lion Inn was cited as having been managed with 1 person. I don't know if that person lives on site or not.
Mr. Chega, it's our position that the Gatehouse building is just one of the principal buildings that make up the transient lodging facility. We're kind of being asked to do 2 different things. On one hand, we're being accused of not having sufficient staff available to staff this facility. And then when we do have staff available to staff this facility, it's somehow being described as incidental.
Well,
So
I don't think that's his point. I think
it's not a subordinate. It is a critical and integral part of the principal use of a transient facility to have the facility manager available for guests at all time. And I do believe that that building serves other functions that are associated with the transient lodging facility. I don't think it is properly characterized as an accessory building, which would be, I don't know, a shed to contain kayaks or something along those lines. I mean, this is a commercial use, it's not a residential use.
Is it common practice, and I don't have an answer for this, is it common practice for small hotels of this sort? I think the Red Lion Inn was cited and a couple of others, to have the staff staying on site, bedroom, sleeping on site, or not? I don't know.
I have to defer to Mr. O'Mara, who is more familiar with these facilities. But I do believe that's the case, but I'll defer to him. I don't know.
Yes,
Woody,
yes, we'd want that person on site. And that's how we planned it.
and there's my understanding that this is where people check in and out.
It's the point of contact as the manager for the property.
So when guests arrived, they check in at the Gatehouse.
The check-in is a little more sophisticated in terms of the technology for check-in. It's not necessarily checking in with that person. That person is there to manage the property. We'll probably have technology for access to the rooms with a pre-approved check-in, but that person is there to run the property and be available to the guests.
Does anyone on the board want to chime in on that point or not?
Woody, it seems to me that I don't know how you could have the other 3 buildings operate without this 4th building. I mean, if you don't have the functions at the Gatehouse, the property is pretty much completely unattended,
Yeah.
and I don't think you can run a business that way.
I'd also add that the ground floor of that gatehouse is where we have our trash pickup, our loading zone, all our operational uses, and there's no occupancy on the ground floor of Gatehouse. That's where we have our trash storage and our facilities.
Okay, Woody, do you have anything else?
Not, I don't think, really, I think some of this is clearer now to me, than it was, that's for sure.
Okay.
Oh, the other, it's just a niggle, and it's, I know you're gonna think this is silly, but if we could go back to the sheet, CAZBA, that does facade area and setback. I certainly now understand the math. It's pretty simple, you know. I'll take facade area and setback main in. It's 446 feet today, and it'll be 652 tomorrow, which means it goes up 46%, or it's 146% of what exists. In other words, 100% is what exists, and then that's plus 46. That's pretty clear. And then I move over, though, to facade area in setback gatehouse, and I see that the building volume in the setback is the sheet is so small. Wait a minute, I can only read it, but it is 10,436 feet existing structure. I go to the proposed structure, which is the same as the other two tables, and it shows it at 0.41, less than a foot. Now that just does, that's not right. It maybe it's 10,475 feet, which is 1 foot more, or a half a foot. But I was kind of puzzled at why it was something happening to the gatehouse, but I don't think you're making the gatehouse more or less non-conforming. It is what it is. Is that correct?
We are only adding nonconformity in the volume in part of the roof, but that's it. And as the numbers churn out, it gives you that.
Right. What I'm saying is you're not, the methodology used in the first two tables is not the same as on the third table. The third table deals on the second column with an addition. The other two tables deal with the totality. How much is the, west or north or whatever. I mean, you've shifted gears there, and you're using a different methodology, and I just think it ought to be consistent. Not hard to do, probably take about a minute, and it's certainly not germane to our decision, I don't think. But I don't like to see, data that is either incorrect or following a different methodology.
Okay, I think, Woody, would it be possible for us to put up the elevation so it can become apparent why that calculation result appears wonky, but actually is the result of something convoluted? So we'll show you in the elevation how that came about.
Okay, you're saying the proposed non-conforming structure in the gatehouse is less than a foot in total. And yet the building volume and the setback of the gatehouse is 10,000 square feet. That's what this chart says. Right? We could deal with it offline. It's not,
Well,
I don't think, impactful.
Susan and Karina, you're muted, just so you know.
I'm muted?
No,
No.
we're fine now.
Yeah, we're
Sorry.
just trying to catch up with the question by getting the drawings in front of us so we can make sure.
Well, we could deal with it, David, offline, but I would like to see the numbers follow the same methodology. If it's A and then column B is A plus new, that ought to apply to each of these tables.
Absolutely. I'll take a look at that and make certain that they're all in alignment.
Yeah, I think we've had such a volume of paperwork and so many calculations and recalculations. I think that it will be helpful before we sign off on a decision on this, that we confirm that all of our documents are the final ones and that the numbers match up and everything. And then we can do that between now and then, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the reason I brought it up is that my earlier notes when I looked at this, which I now know are I know the answer to, said, have they changed the footprint of and the size of the gatehouse? That data might indicate yes, but of course, that's not true. It's not their intention, which is, you know, fine. Their intention's their intention, but it misled me for a while. And I think it's kind of incumbent on all of us to be sure that the data is correct for future viewing.
Mhm. All right.
Oh,
Let's go-
Dave, just one quick question, or
Sure.
you and Woody, just on the gatehouse, perhaps it could be certainly a primary visit, but maybe they could label it as a mixed-use building, so it does cover the different use, the functions of it, where it is not just one. It might be a little easier to identify it in the future as well, so that because it serves several functions. But they'll do it anyway as part of the building code, but that might help to address the different functions the gatehouse performs as far as uses.
Okay, would it, John, require any other approval in terms of mixed, use?
No,
Section 4?
no, they just have to label what the uses are, and then the type of construction
Three of
will
them
follow.
three of them are primarily hotels. Or
Right, that would be
one is a
transient
hotel,
use.
and one is not. It's a mixed use or support activity.
Yeah, and that would help them help the train of thought for that particular building and cover it.
Just make sure that it's a mixed use that's allowed in this new district.
Yeah.
Okay, other board members? Anyone have any questions or comments or concerns? No. Okay. Mr. Brodsky, anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir, I have, as far as I can tell, 3 deliverables. You would like revision to sheet AS 104. You'd like us to add to sheet CA the gross area of the lower level of the new building. And then we'll just confirm that the calculations of the gatehouse are accurate on our facade chart. So we use the same.
Yeah, or consistent with the other two tables.
Yeah, I have no reason to believe we use any different methodology, Mr. Chittick. So,
Yeah.
but we'll just confirm those 3 things.
Okay, I do note that we have a couple of people in the audience that have Q&As. I don't see any hands up, but I do see some Q&A things.
Yes, there are a few hands raised in the audience and a comment and question in the Q&A. First, Tom Callahan left a comment. Proposals to lower the height from 35 feet in the HAR district were discussed and rejected by the collective powers that be during the process. It should have been 28 to 30 for what it's worth. There's another comment from Francis Collins, 404 South Main Street. I would like to address the board before ending the discussions.
Okay. Is Mr. Collins in the audience?
Yes, he's being promoted now.
Okay, excellent. And who else had their hand up?
Philip Cantillon.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Collins first, and then we'll hear from Mr. Cantillon. Mr. Collins, you're muted,
I am unmuted.
and there you are.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Fran Collins, 404 South Main Street. I would like this board to do everything that they can within their powers to deny this special permit. I appreciate the great amount of effort and time that's been spent by the applicant and his various contractors to make this happen, and it's an interesting proposal, no doubt about it. This is the last piece of commercial marine-related real estate in Cohasset Harbor, and once it's gone forever. There's no restoring it. And I think that there are a number of other opportunities that could be used, that property could be used for. And I think if we did some research, we might find that they're there. So at this point, to ask for a special permit to upend zoning to benefit this kind of an unusual hotel that's being proposed there, I'm certainly against it, and I hope you people can find it within your powers to deny this special application. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Collins. And just by way of note, as a zoning board of appeals, we have limited authority to things that we can and cannot consider. As you know, the Conservation Commission has some jurisdiction over things, the planning board has some, and the state has some under Chapter 91. And we can only act within, the four corners of what our authority is. And that's what we will do.
Well, I understand that, David, but of course, they still have to get a license from DEP from Chapter 91, so that remains to be seen how that flies. But
Right.
I know you'll do the best you can, but I want my voice to be heard, and I can't say who I speak for, but I know a number of other people have said the same thing and haven't bothered to take the time to make an appearance. But here we go. Thank you.
I certainly appreciate your input, and I think you put their position together very well. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Cantillon.
Yes, good evening. Philip Cantillon, 97 Border Street. First off, we'd like to thank everybody, the applicants and the board, for all their efforts on this project. We are supportive of it. I raised the question at the last meeting regarding the use of could it be used for anything beyond a hotel? And kind of so that it doesn't become the equivalent of another type of housing, whether it's a condo or apartment, etc. That was, and I saw Mr. Brodsky's clarification on transient housing. And I think it was a communication on the 25th or the 3rd, I forget which document. So one question would be, is it possible for the board to put a length of stay criteria into the special permit? I think Mr. Brodsky cited a case where it's commonly referred to as 30 days. I don't know whether that's the right amount or not. I'm just asking whether or not that is something that can be added on to the special permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting question.
Dave, just the 30 days is a transient definition in the building code for the use. So they can re-up every 30 days, but they can't go longer than 30 days on one contract, if you will. Then it would become a different use. So then they'd have to come back to the board.
Okay. And remind me, I'm trying to look through the bylaws, but I'm not finding it quickly. What are rooming houses prohibited in this district?
Well, the rooming house definition, Dave, has gone away.
It has.
Yeah, it's been subsumed under the more general category of transient use. And let's see what section is. That's I think it's 4, section 4. I mean 4.24, which is a use category of transient lodging facilities, which include, by definition, 3 things: hotels, motels, and inns. Nothing else. So that's allowed. And I'm looking at the residential part of the use 4.2 in this district. special permits, no, that's a highway, waterfront business, not allowed. Multifamily conversion, multifamily dwelling, single-family dwelling, two-family conversion, none of that's allowed, which means that a variance would be required.
Okay.
It's not a forever, no, but it's different set of hoops to jump through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because it does feel to me like extended stays. If it turns out that all the rooms are being rented for 30 days at a time for months and months and months, it sounds more like a rooming house than a hotel.
Hmm.
But, I guess that's a bridge we can cross when we come to it, if we come to it. I did want to ask one question, Mr. Brodsky. The planning boards and the Concom's decisions, is there anything in those orders of conditions that would change any of the application materials that we are looking at now?
No, sir, the same materials.
Okay. And Julia, I
Yeah.
know that you're the keeper of the flame here. How are you feeling about whether you have all of the most up-to-date materials for the application?
So, all of the materials submitted up to date are kept on the website. I have the most recent submission, which was December 2nd, which was not included in your hard copy packets, but
Mhm.
was emailed the link to the website for the materials.
Okay.
So comfortable that those are up to date and available for the public.
Good. Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, it
Wayne, is
looks
there
like we
anybody
have-
else, Julia, in the queue or not?
There are no additional hands raised.
Okay, sorry, Dave, I just.
Let me see, I'm still showing. There is one question in the Q&A.
And there is a hand raised.
Okay,
George, in the Q&A, does the board agree with Mr. Hallen that only up to 30 days stays are allowed?
well, I think if that's the definition of a transient stay, then yes. I do understand that it could be renewed for another 30 days, but I would think
John
that-
has said it's part of the building code, right? Is that right,
Yeah.
John?
Yes, it's a definition. So if they stayed longer than that, it wouldn't be an allowed use for them. And I mean, you could ask them, but it doesn't sound like that's their intent to long term.
What, and you said there's a hand raised in the audience?
It was George. There's
Ah.
no additional hands.
Okay. Well, let me ask the other board members, does anyone feel that we need anything else before we close this hearing?
No,
If you close it, you've got 2 weeks. Do you want to do that or want to wait till?
No, because we're going to need time to go over the draft decision. There's still a lot of blanks in there, so let's continue it. I'll move that we continue this hearing to our January hearing, and we'll have hopefully a pretty complete draft decision by that time that we've had a chance to review and digest the material that came in yesterday, so that whatever comes out is comprehensive and we've considered everything that we need to consider.
Chair McMorris, would you be kind enough to share the draft decision with me prior to the next hearing so we could provide input?
But typically we circulate it, Julia, to the board, right? And if we circulate it to the board, does that require or is it optional to share it with the applicant?
To my knowledge, it's optional for the board, but it does get circulated to the entire board beforehand.
No, but my question is if it's circulated to the entire board, that's been our practice. Is it required to give the applicant a copy? Is it optional? At our
Mr.
discretion?
Chittick, it's entirely optional, but you should also know I'm often asked in other towns to draft zoning board decisions, so it's
Yeah, I'm not
easier
opposed,
to have a
Adam. I'm not
collaborative
opposed. I'm
process.
just wondering if it's really more of a matter of routine or practice.
Yeah, I think with the number of calculations and statistics that are going to go into this one, I think it might be useful to send a copy to Mr. Brodsky. As far as, you can comment on things, but we as a board will not be discussing it until our January meeting.
No, sir, you couldn't. That would be a violation of the open meeting law.
Yes, it would. But you can certainly send comments.
Thank you.
All right, so I've moved to continue this hearing until our January meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Woody Chidick,
Aye.
Lee Darst,
Aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
All right. 82 Border Street is continued to our January meeting. Just for the record, our January meeting is scheduled for, help me out here,
7th.
Julia. The 7th?
Yes.
Okay, January 7th.
Thank you very much and have a good holiday season.
Thank you, you too.
See you in 2025.
All right, next is 34 Brewster Road.
Woody Chidick is recusing himself.
All right, Mr. Chidick is recused from this hearing. 34 Brewster Road is an application by Michael and Lauren Haggerty. It's a small addition to a pre-existing non-conforming structure. We do have a draft decision in our packets. Is there any more information that the applicant wishes to submit or any comments that they wish to make before we close the hearing?
Good evening, John Toriaki, Toriaki Architectural Design. The only additional piece of documentation was just a quick summary of the percentages that was requested by the board, which we submitted as a chart, and that's all we have.
Okay, good. Yeah, we've seen that. Julie, is there anything else that you need to add to the draft?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions or comments?
No.
Anyone from the applicant want to say anything? No? Okay, then I move we close the hearing on 34 Brewster Road.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we close the 34 Brewster Road hearing. All in favor, Lee Darst,
Lee Darst, yes.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Yes.
Dave McMorris, aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
All right, 34 Brewster Road is closed. We will consider the draft decision at the end of our meeting tonight, which hopefully will be very, very soon. Have another item, which is a modification and use special permit for 147 South Main Street. This is an application by the Chavo Family Trust. By way of background, this is a special permit which we issued a few years ago allow a mixed use with some professional office space, which was a specific condition of the special permit, was that the first floor be used for professional office space and the second floor is residential. There were some tight parking issues on the property that were addressed through the square footage calculations. We have an application now to modify that special permit to allow the first floor spaces to be used for candle making, an office space for the candle making business, and a small scale retail use also for the candle making business. And I see Mr. Brodsky is here. Are you representing the applicant?
Excuse me, David, before Attorney Brodsky starts, I recused myself from the original hearing on this, so I'm going to recuse myself at this time.
Okay. Lee Darst is recused. So I see Mr. Brodsky's here and Mr. Schiavo's here.
Yes, Chair McMorris, I'm here on behalf of the Schiavo Family Trust. And you may also have Carrie Kipp in the audience. She's the manager of Minet's Candle Company, Inc., which is the proposed tenant. You may wish to promote her if you have any specific questions regarding her proposed operation.
I think that's a good idea because we likely will.
Thank you. You've summarized the history, so I'll get right to the point. Under the 2021 special permit, there was a total of 17 parking spaces that were authorized, 6 spaces for the dwelling units, and 11 spaces for the professional office use. The parking on this property was previously non-conforming and also, you may recall, subject to a variance, which had authorized the parking of 24 parking spaces, but the board found that the 17 parking spaces were sufficient, provided that commercial space be only used for professional spaces, as examples, a lawyer, an accountant, or a therapist. The proposed use has a low parking demand. What happened is that the building was constructed last year, and the trust has simply been unable to rent it for professional use. It's no surprise that post-COVID that office space use is abundant and difficult to find tenants. Minet's Candles operates a small home-based candle making business that's presently located in Hull. And as I indicated in my materials, they make high-quality, non-toxic, hand-poured candles in small batches, and they do their sales principally online. Ms. Kipp lives in Cohasset, and she'd like to relocate the business from Hull to Cohasset, and she's prepared to lease all those 3 commercial units. 1 unit will be used for candle making in office, and 2 other units will be combined for candle making office and a small scale retail. The candle making process is low intensity with no fire risk, and the building has sprinklers, and so there are no fire safety issues associated with the use. Ms. Kipp intends on employing 2 people at the facility if she's able to lease it. She has not determined her business hours, but intends to be similar to other businesses in the village. There'll be limited weekend hours depending upon the season. As you can appreciate, the holiday season would hopefully be more busy than other times of year. We believe that the existing parking spaces, that will be 11 parking spaces for the commercial use, will be sufficient, and that the parking demand for the proposed use is comparable to an office use. Again, the number of employees that will be employed here will be less than typically associated with office space. Minimal foot traffic will be associated with the use, as well as a minimal vehicle traffic associated with the small scale retail. estimate that the retail use will utilize no more than 800 square feet of the building. Even if you were to apply what I think is the current ratio for retail, 1 space per 100 square foot of net floor area, under current zoning, that would require 8 parking spaces. If we have 2 employees, each whom drives to the facility, that's a total of 10 parking spaces, and we have 11 available for this proposed use. Again, we believe that this would be beneficial to the town to relocate or to locate the business from Hull to Cohasset and avoid having vacant office space in this neighborhood. So both the landlord and the proposed tenant are here to answer any questions regarding the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, before we get to that, I want to give you another chance to speak. We have a bylaw on parking that relates to the number of spaces per, related to the number of square feet for various activities. And in a mixed use application like we have here, we have to consider each use. And it seems to me that a strict application of the bylaw will result in insufficient number of parking spaces. Can you explain to us how and why we could legally depart from that requirement?
You did so in the special permit that approved this project. You deviated from the then current parking requirements because of the prior non-conforming parking conditions and the grant of the variance. That's why you granted relief from the number of parking spaces we would have needed, and agreed that for the use, a total of 17 was permissible. We're simply changing the use, and again, piggybacking on that non-conformity that formed the basis for relief in the first special permit. That's why we're seeking a modification of the special permit.
Okay. Mr. Shavo or Ms. Kipp, do you have anything that you'd like to add to Mr. Brodsky's presentation?
Nope.
Nope. Ms. Kipp?
Nope. But I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns about the business that you may have.
Okay. Let me turn it over to the board members. Anybody want to volunteer to quarterback this one?
Well, I was
That wasn't well put, Dave.
Well, Matt actually turned off his mute, so I figure that's a volunteer right there. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, I know we have it in our packet, but condition, right? It was that it be used for professional space only, parentheses, law, accountant, therapist, etc., offices, for example, and may not be used as retail or service provider spaces. And I know that the applicant refers to it as small scale retail space. And then, I guess when we look at the definitions, it's not really small scale retail, right? It's either retail or it's office space. But the retail does kind of open the door for more intense uses that may not be directly applicable to this business, but are kind of what the decision itself tried to prevent from occurring at the space. So I think if I understand it correctly, if the board was to come to a decision that they were okay with this particular business operating at this space, it could do so, and it's an if, I know we're just kind of getting go, but it could do so, but not actually make the use open-ended as retail, because I think that retail open-ended is not necessarily party of one here, but not necessarily appropriate for the location, depending on, and I think the decision spoke to things like nail salons, hair salons, places that might yield heavy foot traffic might not be appropriate, but just a quick glance, it seems like Ms. Kip's business might not yield that type of volume, but the condition itself could be one that hypothetically, right, if Ms. Kip decided in a year that she was moving somewhere else with her business, the use itself would revert back to a professional space, and Mr. Shavo would have to come back to the board each time that he would look to seek a tenant that was different than that approved use, right?
Mr. Watkins is
Agreeable.
correct.
Brodsky.
The board is and can make this specific to this particular business. And if there was a change in tenancy and a different use, that's correct. They'd have to come forward to the board. And at least with respect to the current requirements, that's why I alluded to the fact that under current zoning for an 800 square foot retail space, that would only require 8 parking spaces. But it's this specific user that we're proposing because the business is so unique, with a majority of sales, personally all sales online.
And I guess question from Ms. Kip would be, you typically don't have any large deliveries, or are there just kind of smaller vans and trucks that might make deliveries to the site?
Yeah, typically UPS or post office, that come in through residential would be going there. We have our own storage unit on 3A, where we get pallet deliveries. So that's where that would happen. It wouldn't happen at this space.
Okay, and what would I understand you have kind of fluctuations around holidays, et cetera, but what would a typical work week look like for your business for hours of operation?
Sure. So right now we're flexible in that our employees work when they can. So we'll say a morning or an afternoon. And that looks like, some days we don't work. But the way that I'm hoping to work this out is Monday through Thursday, 10 to 5 or 10 to 6 maybe during the holiday season. So everyone that works for me are mothers themselves and they need to get home to their families. So I don't anticipate us being open late because it's just not possible for us.
How many people do you have involved in the manufacturing piece?
Currently we have 7. Everyone's part-time.
How many people at a particular time are working there?
Yep. So one person at a time. So one person's making candles and then someone comes in the afternoon and cleans and packages them.
Mr. Brodsky, do you know how many square feet are devoted to there's 800 square feet for the retail space. How many square feet are left in the rest of the building?
Shavo, you'll have to, is each unit 800 square feet? I'm trying to recall.
Yes, basically, yes. That's
Maybe
correct.
about 800.
Mm-hmm.
And this business would occupy the entire space, but just 800 of it would be used for the manufacturing purposes.
No, just for the retail piece. The
It is-
rest would be the manufacturing and shipping.
Okay, I think Matt's question was that the entire first floor of the structure is going to be devoted to your business.
Yes, that's correct.
All 3 units, that's correct.
All what units?
3
Oh,
units.
3 units, yeah,
Yes, sir.
2,400.
But-
Seems to me there are 2 or 3 conditions that would probably be easily met, one of which would be reserving the 11 parking spaces for this business, even though it may not need it, but we don't know. set some operating hours that are reasonable. I know one of the concerns the neighbors had back in 2020 or whenever it was they were afraid that there would be, activity at 10 or 11 at night. And so we put a condition on that, basically. So operating hours, maximum people, I presume the owner, and +2, up to 2. I mean, you may have only need 1 in most cases, but I think you, the owner, +2 would be reasonable. There's plenty of space. And the other thing is that from a retail standpoint, what if, Matt, we conditioned it a little more precisely to the retail sale of candles? I know it would be tempting to, have flowers in there or something, baskets, and all of a sudden it morphs from an occasional candle purchase into probably a very nice but inappropriate for this site retail store. I don't know. Would that be too burdensome if we define what retail means?
Could I make an argument to do like home? So we do sell like accessories for candles. So I just don't want to pigeonhole us too far, but I appreciate the
Throwing
sentiment.
an idea out. I mean, yeah, fire back. What do you mean by accessories?
So there's trays that can hold candles or candle snuffers, which extinguish candles.
Candle related items.
Yeah, sure.
Candle
I mean,
accessories. So it wouldn't include other home decor items. It would all be related to the candles.
If we had to, I do think that could be burdensome, as I'm trying to,
We don't want to make things, difficult for you, but we do want to make things acceptable for the neighborhood.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
What's the current breakdown in your sales between walk-in, your location in Hull, and online?
It's 100% online, so we don't have any in-person sales right now.
Oh, okay. So you really have no idea what kind of foot traffic you're gonna get then, right?
I mean, I think that's fair. I can get a gauge because we do have some local boutiques that we sell into, and also, I get customer questions of where they can shop us in person with local customers. And I have to be honest, like we're going to limit the hours to start just to see how it works so that I'm not over hiring. And we can really figure out how to make this work for us. Said a different way, the retail is a nice bonus for our business and an additional revenue stream that we're looking to gain to help us cover the expense of the new space, of course. But right now, the online business can support the space.
Thank you.
I've got a different kind of question. Why do you need so much space?
So it's a majority storage. So as I mentioned, we make all of the candles, so everything is a raw good. So we have boxes of wax, we have the packaging that goes for, and we need a lot of counter space for the candles to set. So that's kind of our limiting factor in our current space.
Oh, and just to get back to Matt's question too, the 3 units are separate units, so you have to walk outside to get to unit 1, 2, and 3. So if they want to condition what unit number is the retail and so forth, that might be helpful. Just to, I imagine the front unit might be retail, and the back unit might be the manufacturing, and then the other one storage. But just that might help clarify with the board the unit numbers and what use is in what unit.
In Mr. Shavo, you intend to keep them as 3 separate units?
We could connect unit 101 and 102 with a archway to walk between the two of them. Those are the two that are out in the front of the building, and then the back one would stay separate, definitely, which would be her online sales and office and things.
Okay.
That'd be a little bit more customer friendly.
I'm trying to think signage wise, did we,
I'm sorry, what?
as far as signage, did we have, I know there was a lighting plan that didn't include any illuminated signage as part of the professional office space, so would you plan to just have a non-illuminated sign as part of your proposal? I'm just kind of thinking of
When
the
you say
sensitivity.
illuminated, do you mean like those box lit signs, or do you mean like a wooden sign that has like a spotlight on it?
Yeah, I think I was talking more of the box lit ones.
Yeah, no, that's not on brand for us at all. So that definitely wouldn't be something that we were looking to do.
Lighting was one of the concerns that woman who lives next door raised, certainly more than once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that there's
And
the,
this is a residential area, so I think we've got to be respectful of, the neighbors in this.
Absolutely. I live around the corner, so I totally understand that piece of it.
yeah, because I know there's the parking lot lights, which I don't know if they're active currently, but I will say, because I did check the plan that was approved, and it does look like you've fulfilled, what was required in that plan in terms of, a perimeter fence and the plantings that were spec'd into that, as well. So that all looked, like you said it would. So that's a good thing.
Has anyone discussed this with the neighbors?
Yeah.
I know they got notice of the hearing, I'm sure. And I
Yeah,
noticed-
McMorris, I haven't spoken to any of the neighbors.
Yeah, and Julia, they would have been
Com-
notified with this notice of public hearing.
Correct.
We haven't any comments at the building department or zoning department regarding this application to date anyway.
All right. Well, I will note that this property has kind of a long history. It had a variance specifically for parking at one time. We considered that variance when we did the special permit. And I guess the parking issue continues. And I do think that this does appear to be a fairly non-intense parking situation, which is kind of what we've always been concerned about at this particular property. I don't know much about candle making, but it seems to me that this is probably something which is not going to be disruptive to the neighbors at all. So anybody questions or comments or thoughts?
I'd only say that I think if we put a reasonable parameter around operating hours and a reasonable parameter around what does retail mean, which would be candles and candle-related materials only, and possibly a reasonable parameter around number of employees, that would take care of itself. The lighting wouldn't be, or noise or parking might solve itself.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was already taken care of in the original construction, all the lighting and landscaping and all that. I think we're more, concerned with making sure the use is not going to be a little more intensive than a vacant building, but a little less intensive than the businesses maybe that we had approved already. Mr. Brodsky, can I ask that, can you talk to your talk to Mr. Chabot and talk to Ms. Kipp and perhaps give us some suggestions on conditions that would be protective of the neighborhood, but would also work for your client.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anyone else have anything?
I think what the conditions ideally related to delivery, signage, hours of operation.
Detrimentality to the neighborhood in general.
And the
Oh, that's
character
it.
of the business. What does retail mean? Yeah, you don't want to broaden it beyond candle making, but not go into home decor.
Not quite jump to retail, because I think when you read the definition of retail, it's where we don't want to be, you know. But we seem to be trending towards this use being an appropriate one, yeah. So
All right, then Matt, you want to make a motion on this?
yeah, make a motion to. Also, if we closed it, we'd need it in 2 weeks, so
We
we'd
want to
continue
continue.
it. Yeah, make a motion to continue the hearing.
Okay, I'll second that. All those in favor, Woody Chidick,
Aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Chabot, I know you know this, but I'll explain it for Ms. Kipp. What we just continued the hearing until January.
Okay.
Between now and then, we will have a decision drafted. At the January meeting, we'll close the hearing, deliberate on the decision, vote on the decision, and assuming that it's approved, you'll get a copy of a approved decision a few days after that.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Good night. All right. Back to our agenda. We have first item is deliberation of the hearing on 34 Brewster Road. We have a draft decision.
I'm temporarily.
Oh, that's right. Woody's recused on this one, so.
Yeah, and I know the only outstanding item was the calculations, which we got between the hearings. Who had the lead on kind of the liaison lead? Did we have a liaison?
I think we forgot to do that.
I did read it. It looks very accurate according to the hearing and the materials that were submitted. I think Julia did a great job, and I think that it reflects the discussions accurately and the sentiments of the board.
I agree with Lee Doris' comments.
Anyone else have any comments or discussion on the draft decision for 34 Brewster Road? All right, hearing none. I move that we accept the draft decision, filling in any blanks that need to be done.
I second.
All those in favor? Lee Darst,
Aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
Great. Done. Next item on the agenda are minutes from November 12th.
I also read those. I thought they were accurate.
Yeah, I think you continue to do a good job. I thought they looked good.
Thanks. I'd like to state that I'm going to continue with the past tense just so I can keep the same techniques as previously done.
I thought you were gonna
like
keep
the way-
Woody on his toes and change tenses.
Oh, back and forth. And then we can go to the future tense. Just don't get
Anybody have any
tense.
comments or corrections on the November?
No,
12th?
Julia, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I have one little point of clarification, but it's not worth taking the board's time up. It's just a phrase that I think we could, it's a little thing. No, I thought it was great, actually.
Yeah. It was a long hearing, so I make a motion that we accept the November minutes with any edits.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor, Woody Chidick,
Aye.
Lee Dars,
Aye.
Mike Dickey.
I wasn't actually attending the last meeting, so I should abstain, shouldn't I?
Okay. Dave McMorris, aye. Matt Hawkins.
Aye.
Charlie Higgins and I.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charlie. Okay, that's done. Next item of business. Discussion of the zoning bylaw amendments, which are in our packet. Before we-
Okay, I did not read all those.
You did not read them all. We're relying on you to read these.
I went for the shorter ones.
Actually took the warrant with me on a trip recently. I was gonna read it there and I never got to it.
You lost them.
But I've been-
I read the first few pages of the warrant, but it's rather lengthy. Tom has read all of the warrant. He drafted all of the warrant.
Well, I had a lot of issues originally, not a lot. I had some issues with the ADU bylaw earlier, but that's all been addressed to my complete satisfaction. I will say that much. And what was the other one that I had an issue with, but it's all fine. Oh, land alteration. I think that's been improved.
All right, well, let's start with the land alteration bylaw, which is PB4. Tom, do you want to just?
Yeah, it's now Article 14 in the warrant.
Okay. And can you tell us, are there significant changes between the existing and the proposed land alteration bylaws?
Yeah, or the intent here is to take away some of the exemptions that are in the existing bylaw. We're seeing a lot of more blasting projects going on. There's far too much alteration of visible ledge that's slipping under the radar because of exemptions. So, since these amendments were done in 2018 town meeting, and since I've been on the board since 2019, there's been one special permit application under this bylaw. We all see the project that's going on near Cunningham Bridge. I've gotten 2 complaints about blasting and ledge clearing in the last 2-3 weeks. The properties that are left to be developed are the more marginal properties that weren't developed in the past for a reason. So, the main part of it is on the clearing aspect of the bylaw, we are taking away a lot of the references to the land use codes of the assessor's office. That was done when we drafted this as a citizen's petition. But the main change is to take away the exemption of a small lot under 18,000 square feet, which is the minimum size required in Residence A. There's no logical reason that small lot should be exempt from clearing regulations. The other major change is in the earth removal and the ledge removal is to basically take away the automatic exemption for accessory structures. We still exempt that amount of surface ledge, and again, the bylaw regulates just exposed ledge, that you need to do the main house and the utilities. For the accessory dwelling or structures on the property, you'd now have to go through the special permit process. It's not an automatic prohibition, it's not an automatic allowance, but it's taking it out of being exempt, as is the main house, and bringing it in at least into the special permit process, and hopefully gaining some more control about what's going on in various parts of town. And that's it in a nutshell.
All right. Tom, you know, actually, this is a little off topic, but the definition of garage, attached, detached, that
Yeah,
you
we-
have in this bylaw,
Yeah,
actually addresses an issue that we've had come up a couple of times, because we've had situations where a garage gets attached by a breezeway.
Yep.
And then it's considered to be an attached garage or an unattached garage. And, you know, depending on what it's considered to be, it changes setback requirements.
Yep.
And I had kind of forgotten about it, but I think that's something that we probably should put in the general bylaw definitions as well.
yeah, I can't recall if in Article 2 we have a definition of a garage. If we do, we can make that change, and that'd be a housekeeping change in the future.
And it may not even have been a garage, it might be accessory structure in general.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but we're trying, obviously we're trying not to give anybody a loophole.
Yeah, I mean, if it's accessory structure that's attached by a breezeway, then it probably is an accessory structure and not an attached part of the primary building.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I gotta tell you, well, the other change, just so I want to point it out, I can't find it. There's a part in here where, the one project we did permitted, was Actors Row. That was the one permit we saw for ledge removal. And the applicant and the engineer came up with the idea, all right, we're removing visible ledge in this place, but we'll uncover ledge in another place. And it's sort of like wetland replication, so we have ledge replication. And so that was a policy. We adopted that as a condition of that project. Now we're putting it in here as an option that the board can order in the future. That's the other thing. But I got to tell you, there is some sentiment on the planning board. People are upset about all the blasting and ledge removal, even the subsurface ledge. And I tried to caution people on the limits of how far we can regulate, so we don't get into prohibiting any use of a property. We'd get into a taking. But, there are a lot of people who are upset about the degree of blasting that's going on, the ledge removal that's going on.
I'm kind of breaking up here, Tom.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but the policy down by the ocean is the current poster child of the moment. But there's a growing sentiment to get even stricter with ledge removal. But I think this is, the limit of what we do at the present time under the state of Massachusetts law and takings law. So.
Okay.
Tom, I've
So
got a
that's
question.
it in a nutshell.
Well, I've got one question, and it has to do with right in the front page, exposed ledge face. Any portion of a rock formation, which includes subsurface rock formation extending 15 feet from. Now, is that 15 feet laterally? Could it be 15 feet down? Could it be, what if?
It's lateral. It's
doesn't say that.
lateral, and that, well, all right, so we'll amend it on the floor if you want the word lateral in there, but it was lateral, and that's part of the sentiment of members of the planning board to try to somehow control even the removal of subsurface ledge. So the thinking was, well, the ledge that's popped up above the ground is connected to something just nearby. 15 feet was admittedly an arbitrary number, but it is meant to be lateral.
Yeah, because I think if it were, that may be your intention, lateral, and I think that's good. But if somebody wanted to make an issue out of it, maybe an unhappy neighbor, and you were on a steep slope, 15 feet could be at a 45-degree angle or worse, and that would be kind of ridiculous, I think.
Let's go get a pen so I make a note to myself, otherwise I'll forget. Make an amendment on the floor if we need to.
I don't think you'd run into any opposition.
Well,
You never know, but I don't think
you
so.
never know. I mean, you never know because people will say we're trying to obstruct the use of property. Anyway, that's the end.
Well, they may object to the subsurface part, but they wouldn't object if you added lateral to eliminate
Right.
ridiculous, but nevertheless, fearsome interpretations.
Yep. Okay. So you can see everybody else on the boards who looked at this unanimously agreed with the amendments. So I ask for the same from you guys.
I'd make a motion to approve with that one change about lateral. Sure.
For a second? Second. All right, it's moved and seconded to recommend planning board Article 4, which is, say, it's warrant Article 14, Tom? I'm pretty sure you said 14.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Woody Chidick?
Aye.
Lee Darst?
Aye.
Mike Dickey?
Aye.
Charlie Higginson?
Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye. Matt Watkins?
Aye.
All right.
Dave, just a quick question on that too.
It's Article 13, my bad. So
13. Okay.
13, sorry. Long day.
John?
We've just had some questions of the building department. For example, if someone wanted to put up a shed and it's next to an exposed ledge, they have to go to the planning board because of the 15-foot rule that we just implemented.
Yeah.
Look,
John, you're very well aware that we're getting lots of complaints about blasting everywhere. Two
Yeah,
in the last 2 weeks. You know, we got to be more on top of this. And if it means people are going to have to go through a special permit process, so be it. There's a growing sentiment that this is getting out of control.
Well,
I'm just getting the questions. That's why I'm asking. Because sometimes a trip to the planning board is going to cost more than the shed. So it's.
Well, yeah, but John, they're not, if they're putting the shed on dirt that's so it's on subsurface ledge.
Well, if it's next to
they're not going to be removing any ledge.
Yeah,
Right,
it'll be an easy grant of a permit, by the way.
So they have to come to you even if they're not removing any ledge, Tom?
That's the way it reads.
The definition of exposed ledge face that I said that some of the members have wanted because they want to expand the prohibitions as much as we can push the limits is not only the exposed ledge feet, but 15 feet lateral from it.
Well, that's
so if you're removing the ledge 15 feet from an exposed.
No, but if somebody's putting a shed.
All right, well, then the interpretation is probably that they're not going to need a permit. The bylaw is dealing with if you are removing.
Right. So if you're not removing any ledge, you don't need to go to the planning board, I assume.
I would agree with that interpretation. Yes.
Okay.
I just say more of a question.
All right. Anything else? All right, we're on to planning board 5, which is Article what, Tom?
Which one is that? We were only here to
implementation of development.
New development impact.
Oh, did we not do that before? Okay. So that one is Article. That one is Article 14.
Okay.
And hold on. So this, has been talked about for some time, and between myself and Carolyn, we've looked at different towns. Carolyn's the primary author, and I thank her for this final product. We looked at Hanover has something of this, Dedham has something like this, but both with respect to their large commercial projects that both towns could have. The concern here is that, like, for example, when we had a recent subdivision on Black Horse Lane, yes, it was small, but that's usually what we have is smaller subdivisions, and nevertheless, there was going to be some impacts on the older part of Black Horse Lane. And we had no authority had authority to negotiate it. We negotiated something, but we couldn't negotiate perhaps what we wanted, or couldn't demand what we wanted to mitigate the impact of that project. So it's been talked about for a while, and then, to the extent that the MA district may bring in some large scale projects, but for the large scale, we want to be prepared to be able to request and demand certain amounts of mitigation, be it sidewalks, contribution to the sidewalk fund, other infrastructure improvements that are being impacted. What we can't do is we can't offset any adverse impacts from increased school population, but there's a lot of other things we can do. So this bylaw is intended to put that into place, and it'll give both your board and our board tools. For your example at 82 Water Street, if you wanted to order some mitigation, right now it's a negotiation matter. It's not necessarily something you can impose.
What do you mean, Tom, by throughout the section 4 mitigation? It's the phrase is used, the planning board or zoning board of appeals as applicable. What is the zoning board of appeals role? I mean, what triggers that?
Or the projects that you have special permit authority over. You still have the sole special permit authority in the Harbor District. Don't you have it over floodplains as well? There's projects where you have jurisdiction and we don't, and we have jurisdiction and you don't.
Well, one of the things we don't do or haven't done in all my many years is do much, if anything, in terms of mitigation.
Yeah, because we don't have the legal authority to impose it. And sometimes it may be necessary. A board will need to make a finding that it's going to be necessary, and then it needs to then it will have the authority to do something appropriate.
So all of a sudden, then we'll be in the business of saying, here's what you have to do to restore loss of trees and vegetation, the kind of vegetation that we want to see.
Yeah, or
that's moving us into a different.
You're putting a hotel in the harbor and there's no sidewalk in the harbor, so we're going to have you build a sidewalk or contribute to the town sidewalk fund. That's what's going to, in the example of the Black Horse Lane subdivision, we could not have ordered a sidewalk to be put in out to Summer Street. Would have loved it if we could, but we couldn't, because on that particular street, it would have all crossed private property. But we could have imposed a contribution to the town's new sidewalk fund. Didn't have the authority to do that.
I'm wondering if this is taking us into a different arena.
Well, it's taking us into protecting the town's interest when a larger scale development comes into.
But our primary role, and then I'll shut up and let other people talk. Our primary role is to apply the zoning bylaws in terms, as opposed to be a traffic cop in terms of vegetation or, I don't know, earth removal or things like that.
Well,
maybe we should. I'm just.
Yeah, I'm thinking
maybe
the planning board would, when we also have site plan review, maybe we get into it more than you do, but, I can see this really coming, we have a possibility of a larger scale subdivision on Jerusalem Road because of recent litigation up in Jerusalem Road Estates. If you remember that one, goes back years. Jerusalem Road and Black Rock Lane or Black Rock Road. That's a larger scale subdivision that's going to have a certain amount of potential impacts. And then there's the MBTA thing, and whether we ever get a development there, that's going to have some larger scale impacts that we might want to have the tools in our pocket to try to mitigate in some way, shape, or form. And this is finally giving us the legal authority to do it. We don't have to use it, but it's there for us to use if we need it. Same thing in the village, you know, when One Pleasant Street was permitted, all we could tell them to do, actually, I think they volunteered to do it, all was to redo the sidewalk in front of their property. Well, what if it had a greater impact in the village, you know? Sidewalks beyond that, parking demands, traffic demands. We now would have the tool, rather than to rely on the good faith of a developer in negotiations, to impose something if we feel it's appropriate.
Oh, excuse me.
It's a tool. And it's used. Again, this came off of Hanover, Dedham, which again, we're dealing with their larger commercial projects. And then I think she borrowed from, Carolyn borrowed from a smaller town that she was familiar with, that they may represent one of the Medways, Medfields, something like that. But
I can see commercial. I'm just curious about residential.
well, what we did was, it's applicable to anything that needs a special permit or site plan review. So that's all the commercial.
But I think I read it last time.
Except, and I think this came from an earlier comment of yours, Woody, that we accepted residential projects that require a special permit under Article 8, the non-conforming thing. And then it'll apply to any residential or commercial subdivision of 3 or more lots. So I'm going to take out A&Rs. And then it is going to be applicable to a large home review of the planning board, which is a single family house. And will it ever be actually applied to impose mitigation on a single family house? Probably not. But
Yeah, I think I brought that up last time, right?
I'll give an example that there's a 10,000 square foot house under construction on Little Harbor, and, you know, with a stone's throw from North Main Street. Could that potentially have had some adverse impact on infrastructure? Maybe. And if that unique situation came up, we'd have the authority to do something about it. So it's
But
geared.
condition H in there would, I think I brought this up last time, would give you, for a large home review, that would, I think, leave people with the impression, right, that you're gonna implement individual mitigation in regards to, you know, whether it be office space for people because of noise, or landscaping, or stuff like that. I'm not sure if you got any.
Well, a large home review is mainly a site plan review process applied to residential structures. It's not a yes or no decision, and we already, under the 4 criteria we have, we can impose conditions regarding landscaping, traffic, lighting. We do lighting all the time. I don't think it'll ever, you know, go beyond what we normally do in large home review, but again, a number of the members in the planning board thought it was important that we have at least the authority in the rare case where it may be appropriate. You can see from the other applicability, but most of it is geared towards larger projects requiring special permit or site plan or a subdivision, or larger subdivision.
I know that I brought up Article 8, which is a non-conforming, but of course,
Yes.
Article 9, we have really limited, but nevertheless special permit authority, but it's very limited, subservient to what the Conservation Commission is responsible for. And there are special permits, use, so on and so forth. I'm just wondering how expansive this is for the zoning board in particular. And whether it will run afoul of other kinds of decisions we're empowered to make or requested to make.
But you don't have to impose mitigation. It's not mandatory to impose mitigations. You have to make a finding first that mitigation is necessary. That there is something, you know, something that on the protected interests of it, that is in play that you feel you need to impose a condition to protect.
But I'm wondering if you're taking a big swing at this, and it may not be necessary. I'm thinking of people's pocketbooks. I want to do something modest
I don't,
to my home. You know, do I have to, in every case, hire a lawyer and environmental engineers to identify issues like historic resources and?
well, as a lawyer, I would tell you you should anyway if you're getting a permit from a town board, but that's me, but stop.
Somebody's not muted.
No, it's Willie, my dog. He's,
Oh.
He's not muted.
no,
Never mind.
he's wanting to go out. He freaks out every time I'm on the phone, and I'm just doing this on my phone rather than the computer.
I'm just wondering, Tom, if you'll run into a bit of a buzzsaw because people will say, gee, every time I want to do anything, I now have to have a lawyer and show up before the zoning board because they have.
It's only applying to residential in the case, potentially applying to residential in the case of large home review. So it's not applying to every residential project in town. And again, the board needs the planning board in that case will need to make a finding that it's necessary. And I don't think we discussed that at length, that I didn't think it would. You know, including large home review was a concession to certain members of the planning board who thought it was important.
I think anybody who's facing large home review probably has professional representation.
Yeah, they do, and they should.
Tom, I noticed it refers to special permits. What about variances?
What about them?
It doesn't apply. If someone's doing a project that requires a variance, that's.
Yeah. And if it's a commercial project, it's already subject also to a site plan or a special permit. Project on 3A, the harbor or the village, it's going to already need that. It may also need a variance, but it's already going to be captured by the need for a special permit or a site plan.
Okay. Yeah, anybody have questions about any more about this? Okay. Anyone have a motion?
Just sit down. Okay.
I mean, to me, it seems appropriate maybe on the commercial side or the subdivision side. I'm not sure if I'm there on the
residential.
I think some of the large home review stuff, it's an overreach. So
already overreach. If somebody makes a moment, the subdivision should be in there, and 3 was picked because Black Horse Lane was 3, it was 4. If somebody makes an amendment, I'm not going to cry about it. That's me personally, but you know, it would be what the planning board would do at the meeting. I don't know. Again, the inclusion of that was at the request of some, but not all of the members of the planning board.
yeah, so I don't know where I'm listening with it, but I don't know if we want to take.
I think, like I said,
or what, but
I think you'll find it rarely, if ever, applied in a large home review situation. I can't think of any we've had recently, other than even the 10,000 square foot house on Little Harbor. I can't see that we would have imposed anything there.
yeah, and I guess my opposition to it is like I think it just gives people false hope that you have that. I mean, I understand like it gives you that tool if you need it, but to have a tool that we probably don't plan on implementing, I think gives people false hope on the residential side, you know.
And this may be embedded in the bylaw, but it really doesn't relate to our primary duties. I'm kind of leaning towards abstention. I mean,
what do you think our primary duty is? To not only implement the zoning bylaw and the state zoning act, but also I think it's in the purpose of the bylaw, somewhere in Article 1, that we're here to protect the residents of the town. You know, if I could paraphrase, from the impacts of the adverse impacts that may result from development. I don't think it's just limited to being an interpreter of law and an applier of law. It's done. The law is there for the purpose of protecting residents from just willy-nilly development. That's why we have zoning. And it's our job to do that.
Right. And this is establishing the bylaw that we would then be charged with enforcing. You know,
It's giving us, well, it's, again, it's an optional tool. It's not a mandatory tool, but it's giving us a tool we do not have right now to respond to development that is already happening in, you know, that has happened in the harbor and the village, and that, you know, potentially could happen on 3A. I mean, I thought of this first solely in response to the MBTA communities thing, because I think we will need it.
Well, here's what I would move that the zoning board recommend this article with the proviso that in section 311.2 applicability, that in the fourth line, or subject to the words or subject to 305.5 large house plan review, that be stricken.
I can buy into that, Dave.
Give me that again. So you're.
Okay, good.
He's
Fourth line
proposing
under the applicability.
It's proposing we take large home review projects out of the applicability of the statute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it would be, we're in the fourth line after it says zoning bylaw, strike the words or subject to section 305.5 large house plan review.
Okay, and that will do what? What will that accomplish?
That will mean that any.
It means that in a large home review, the planning board will simply continue to do business as usual and apply whatever conditions are permitted on the 4 criteria we review. And if there was some other off-site impact that the house, this giant house, was causing, we would not be able to impose any mitigation for that other than what we could accomplish by negotiation. So it would be business.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think
it would be business as usual.
I think some of the issues that were of concern, especially with large house plan review, are going to be ameliorated somewhat by the change in the land alteration bylaw.
Yeah, perhaps in part, yeah.
So I think, and I do think that having residences other than a subdivision in this bylaw is going to be an iceberg at town meeting.
It's going to be what, Dave? I'm sorry, I did get.
An iceberg.
An iceberg, meaning?
Meaning people are not going to, it may kill the whole article.
Because it's most of it's under the surface, you don't realize the implications.
But I think the rest of it, I think having a mitigation tool for large commercial or residential subdivisions is something that we could really benefit from.
Yeah.
But I don't want to jeopardize the potential for this to pass at town meeting by having it apply to a single home.
Yeah. I wonder if that takes it out. I would agree. I would think this is a classic planning board area of involvement and leaving the individual home, single family or whatever family alone.
Yeah, I you know, personally, I thought it was a bit of an overreach, but, you know, again, to get the majority of my board to support this, it went in, but in a perfect world, there would be no large home review because we would be replacing everything with floor area ratio, but I don't live in a perfect world anymore, so.
All right, so I have a
I'm not gonna
motion-
I'm not gonna sit here and be a giant defender of the large home review process.
All right. So I have a motion to approve this, to recommend this article with that amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Charlie Higginson will, oh, whoa, aye.
All right. So Woody Chidick,
Come back to me. I want to mull this over.
all right, Lee Darst,
Aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
All
Back to
right,
you, Woody.
all right, aye.
All right, let's move on to,
First, John, the last one is Article 17, which was the last minute addition to the warrant.
and this is the accessory dwelling unit.
No, this is the MB.
We haven't voted on accessory dwelling.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, okay. All right. Well, so that's Article 15. Is it? So is this numbering screwed up? No, I guess, no, that, you're right. Article 15 is the ADU one. So in a nutshell, the ADU law by the state has made what we used to allow by special permit as of right. So we had to make the change to accomplish that change in state law or the new state law. And then based on discussions, I think with you guys more than anybody else, we are creating a possibility of a slightly larger ADU at 1,250 square feet, which would still be by special permit.
And Woody, you had done a lot of thinking on this. What's your,
I think it's much improved. I can absolutely go for it.
you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to, well, I'd like to hear from other people if there are concerns.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
Anybody
I
else?
have one question on the ADU. Would that be considered an accessory dwelling? But it's a right. So would that have to go to a special permit too?
No,
For a ledge?
no. So
Only if it's over 900 feet.
when we
Right.
made, our former bylaw said an ADU would be restricted to inside the house, 900 square feet is the maximum size. Then we amended it to allow an ADU to be built in an accessory structure, but still at 900 square foot limit. The state has come along with a new state law and said ADUs should be allowed as of right up to 900 square feet. Okay, so we had to change our bylaw now to make the ones up to 900 square feet allowable as of right. And we are adding a slightly larger ADU up to 1,250 square feet. That will be by special permit.
But if they're removing ledge for that building, do they have to go for a special permit, or is it a matter of right?
No, that's a separate bylaw, separate thing, yeah.
Oh.
Why?
That's a good
But if it's a
question.
matter of right,
I'm
you're
sorry, why
asking for a
is that
special
right?
permit.
Why, yeah, you don't need a permit for the ADU, but you just don't get it to put it there. You can't put it in wetlands, you can't put it, why is this surprising? I mean, there are multiple laws that apply to certain things, and sometimes some apply, sometimes they all apply. You know, you're asking me for a snap legal decision on this, but yes, if it was ADU itself, under a 900 square foot ADU built in an outbuilding would not need a permit for it itself. But if it's being built and removing ledge in the process or filling wetlands in the process, it's going to need a different permit. Yes.
Okay, I just didn't know whether it would be like part of the house or part of an accessory structure. That's why I was asking. We're having the same struggle in our building codes too to figure out how we're going to implement this stuff. So that's all.
Okay.
Anyone else have-
Okay, I've made a motion.
All right. Is there a second? Second? All right. All those in favor of PB6, which is Article 16? Woody Chidick?
Aye.
No,
Lee
it's
Darst?
Article 15, sorry.
15.
Yeah.
Lee Darst,
Aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
All right. And the last one is the MBTA.
Planning Board 11, MBTA zoning consistent and wetlands.
Article 17, so, last year when we got the MBTA communities thing approved, it was a preliminary approval we got from what is now called the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which used to be DHCD, but now it's EOHLC. However, in their review of it, they didn't catch this that they're bringing up to our attention now after the fact. And the AG has approved the bylaw, the district exists. But what happened is that under the MBTA Communities Act, you cannot have a special permit applied to the project. It's by right. You can have site plan review, you can't have special permit. The district we created overlaps with our watershed protection district, which is now section 9.4 of the bylaw. And that requires a special permit to build anything in that district, and that's what they did. So we had to reconcile this by exempting the special permit process of the watershed protection district from any project in the MBTA district. The MBTA overlay basically overrules the watershed protection district procedurally. The content of the watershed protection district and what kind of uses are prohibited and allowed will still apply, but we just don't apply a special permit process to it. So when the planning board gets one of these projects and does its site plan review, it is also going to have to consider the content of the watershed protection district.
Okay. And it says
the two districts are.
It says we're deleting language shown as strike through and inserting text shown as underlined. I don't see any strike throughs.
No, there aren't.
Okay.
It's really just adding this new subsection D to the article we just passed last year.
Okay. Any questions or comments? All right. I move that we recommend PB 11, which is Article
17.
Second it.
All those in favor, Woody Chitik,
Aye.
Lee Darst,
Aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
All right.
All right,
Thanks, Tom.
and
Hey,
sorry,
Tom.
sorry if I was testy. I have one quick question for you. I have distributed a set of regulations because the planning board has to reform its regulations. We're moving some wind and solar things at town meeting into regulations. We have to reform common driveway because of the changes we made a year ago. We needed to update the subdivision ones, at least housekeeping. But originally I intended that all the land use boards have all the regulations in one volume like state regulations are done. Shot down by town council is too complicated, too cumbersome because every board has to approve their own regulations, which I understand. So in what I circulated, there are certain proposed regulations that are for permits that you guys issue, but not the planning board. So Carolyn said today, we really can't take that up in our planning board hearing to approve these new regulations, which is scheduled for December 18th. You'd have to have a separate one. So I just want you to consider it. A lot of the things that have to do with your board are anticipatory. You know, in the same way we're moving a lot of application materials, the wind and solar bylaw out of the bylaw and into regulations. It's the same principle with a lot of the other special permits that your board and our board issues, is to get stuff in the future that needs to be more easily changed on the dime by amending a regulation out of the bylaw text. So you looked at what I circulated.
We haven't seen it yet, have we, Julia?
No, it was, I hope it was distributed to you. I thought I confirmed that with Cassandra this morning. But at the planning board's hearing on these regulations on December 18th, we're only going to deal with the parts that deal with the planning board, not going to deal with your part. Whether you want to go ahead and hold your own public hearing and adopt these regulations is up to you. Just want you to take a look at it. Tell me what you think, and then take whatever action you think is appropriate afterwards. That's so I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
All right.
If you didn't get it, Julia, if you could just make sure from Cassandra that you get everything circulated. I thought I copied you all when I first circulated it, but whatever.
Yes, I'll send it out tomorrow afternoon.
Light reading to put you to sleep.
And Tom,
Yep.
before you go, one other off-topic thing. I do think that this Border Street project has brought to our attention that as development and redevelopment goes on in the flood zones, there are going to be height considerations. You know, for this one, they have to go up 13 feet before they start any structure. And they did have, fortunately for them, non-conforming structures already, so they're not creating new non-conformities. But it seems that we're going to have problems even, you know, if somebody has to go up 10 feet under the new flood regulations, that leaves a pretty short distance for a structure to get up to 35 feet. So I do think it's something that we need to think about and how we're going to handle it.
Well, for many years, I've thought about height in the harbor since the hotel project, you know, since the overlay bylaw was proposed. And I remember one voice questioned the height during town meeting and nobody else did, and it wasn't worth getting up to make a fight about it. But the hotel project, you know, the condo project is the result of us not addressing height, taking into account base flood elevation. I think Woody will recall going back to the working group and bylaw committee, we discussed this at length. And I said, we have to do something different in the harbor with respect to height. And the consensus just hasn't been there. And now that we have a project that's pushing the limit again, like the hotel and condo conversion project, you know, now all of a sudden, well, we need to do something. Well, it's been talked, that's why I made that comment earlier. It's been talked about and nobody's wanted to make the necessary change. So I think I'm somewhat bemused that these comments come up after the fact when we've talked about it.
Well,
you know,
I don't think that's
absolutely.
It's one thing when you have, you know, a new building going up. But I would expect that there are going to be buildings that are on the harbor now, existing buildings that are conforming, or at least are conforming as to height, that are going to have to get raised. And they're going to be over height when they get raised. How do we deal with that?
Well, like the Atlantica project is not doing that because they would have had to go, the Atlantica project would be a story in the air before you got to the first floor.
Right.
Okay. This project, I don't know why it's not running into the same problem, but so, you know,
The
basically,
bylaw is silent
if we had said it's 28 feet over base flood elevation or whatever, which was a arbitrary number that I'd thrown out 3 years ago.
You're breaking up, Tom. We missed you.
The property on, you might end up with a property on the side as high base elevation only being 1 story, 1 floor. I mean, you know, not a 2-floor structure. And if the intent of, you know, height restrictions was to, you know, preserve views of the harbor for everybody else, that's what it would have done. You know, the hotel project or whatever it is, you know, that's going to be 50 feet in places off the ground because of the base flood elevation and the 35-foot limit and the 35-foot limit before we changed the definition. It's not like we haven't been warned about this, but again, this has been talked about, but nobody has wanted to, there's no consensus yet of actually doing something and imposing the kind of restriction which might be, okay, if you have to go up in the air, so be it, but you're only going to get one floor of usable space beyond that.
But what if you have an existing two-story building that has to go up? You're gonna have to tear the top floor off?
If it's an existing building that goes up, I guess
Yeah.
not, you wouldn't. I don't know. I don't
We
know.
have one in front of us right
We
now.
we don't have an approach in the bylaw to handle that. Like I said, these were non-conforming buildings, but if we have
Okay.
conforming buildings as to height,
I just know in the case of Atlantica, if they tear down, they have to conform to all the current rules of base flood elevation.
Right.
That's why Atlantica is not being torn down. Because it would be prohibitively ridiculous. They would have been a story into the air before they could occupy anything. You know, this one, if this one is an existing building being raised, no, we don't have that scenario. At the old hotel and at Atlantica, we're dealing with existing buildings. One was raised, one wasn't. The one that's raised is conforming to the laws that existed at the time. No, we don't have that. But the core problem, the starting point problem for me has always been that it's still 35 feet on the water side of the harbor, and I don't think it should be personal. But the consensus to do that is not there. And Woody, you'll recall these discussions a long, long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, 35 feet, not on pilings, okay. 35 feet on top of a 15-foot piling is really, the visual impact is more mass. It may not be more mass to speak of, but it's going to be a lot more visible and it's going to loom larger, as you know, Tom. I mean, it's that we're going to hear about that in a year or two or three.
Yeah, we're going. I just like we had no opposition to the hotel project until it started construction. I guarantee we'll have complaints about this one. You know, but we're not getting proposals for new boat yards, you know, new boat filling stations or anything else. We can't let these properties go fallow either. But you know, now the horse is out of the barn. We think about what's left in the harbor. And do we change the bylaw for it? I'm all in favor of it, but you know, again, you have to have a consensus for it, and people only get involved, as we all know, until things are already done and being built. You know.
Well, I've always maintained that it's different. You know, obviously, it's difficult to anticipate the future, but just because this hotel will get built or whatever in Atlantica will get built, doesn't mean that something could not happen to other properties that may be part of the Oaks. Maybe, who knows? You know, somewhere in Howard Gleason Road.
Well, yeah. I mean, overall, with the possible impacts on the coastline in the future, you know, we could have residential houses look like Peggotty Beach and all have to go up. We don't have a landscape necessarily like Peggotty Beach.
Right, what's the matter? Shaking.
Oh, we all have animals joining us tonight. So I think we have a lot.
What's your motivation?
There's a lot more that we have to do to deal. You know, I went to one of the when Coastal Zone came down in the summertime to the harbor, and they were showing projections for what the sea level rise could be by 2050 and 2075. And talking about raising the street and the cove and putting in seawalls in the cove. We haven't gotten that far yet in any of the discussions in town of what all of that's going to look like. And we have to, we should start thinking about it. I think Coastal Zone said they're getting a grant and they're going ahead with raising Elm Street in the cove. Okay, what's that going to look like after it's done? And what if residential structures or structures on the land side of Elm Street have to be raised up? You're right. We need to anticipate that and think about that. And if we're going to still have 35 feet, you know, unless you can raise an existing structure, which you'd be grandfathered for, we need to think about whether 35 feet is appropriate in the harbor to the extent you know, we have other values like preserving views and that kind
Well,
of thing.
all right, but let me ask Dave a question. Dave, are you suggesting that this topic be taken up in a more formal way by a zoning working group, a zoning
Yeah,
bylaw
I mean,
committee?
I think that there are going to be situations where you have a house that's 32 feet high, but it needs to go up 4 or 5 feet. It's not, it's now conforming, it's not going to be not conforming. So we're in a variance territory.
Well, let me suggest, I mean, there are very few places I think in town where that's actually going to happen except along Elm Street, Summer Street, you know, maybe Black Horse Lane, places that are in the already identified flood hazard areas if the sea level rises quite a
What
bit.
about Atlantic Avenue?
Atlantic Avenue is kind of perched up, but yeah, that too. So, I mean, there are towns near us, next to us, who have raised houses, raised existing houses. I mean, a simple inquiry as to how they deal with it in their bylaw would probably be a good place to start. Marshfield, they raise houses in the floodplains in Brant Rock, and they do it in Situate and Peggotty Beach and Oceanside Drive now. They must have dealt with it somehow. And I guess if you're raising an existing house, you're going to get to keep it at 35 feet, and it's going to be very much taller into the air. Yes, but I think if you start like the decision Atlantica faced, if you tear down and have to start over, you're going to deal with different rules. And our challenge is, what would those different rules be?
Well, that under our current bylaw, if you have an existing house that's 35 feet and has to go up, you can't without a variance.
We haven't seen houses raised yet. So again, I think that's easy to deal with by looking at what our neighbors do in those situations because they've done
Yeah,
it.
we haven't had to deal with it yet. I think
Yeah.
before we have to is a good time to.
But
Yeah,
even
I certainly wouldn't want to see the harbor looking like Peggotty Beach if we could help it.
No, but let me give you, our bylaw also says, like, so let's say Atlantica had to tear down. All right, state rules would have told them they have to go up above their base flood elevation, which is a lot higher than the hotel site. Our bylaw would still let them go 35 feet up from that. And that was my warnings call about the hotel project.
Our bylaw wouldn't let them go up 35 feet.
Of course it is. Our height limit is 35 feet, and it's 35 feet above.
From pre-construction grade.
Pre-construction grade.
Well, I
That's
don't
what it
know.
says.
Don't know that applies when you have base flood elevation. That's where there's conflict between two things. That would be an interesting test case of what would happen in that situation, but I think.
No, because our height bylaw.
I know what it says. I know what it says.
Measures from pre-construction grade.
Yeah, and I am sure there's somebody in coastal zone management that says, well, pre-construction grade now means base flood elevation grade.
Well, they can say it, but it doesn't.
Well, again, these are just issues we need to think about in clarifying the bylaw where we need to clarify it to address these things. And if a state agency overrules us or a court overrules us someday, so be it. But you know, let's start by looking at how Situate and Marshfield deal with raising houses.
But who is that? Who is that we?
I don't know. I'm not going to be around much longer to deal with this stuff. So
the reason I brought it up to you is so that you can take it to your board, because I think that's the we that's supposed to look at it first.
Yeah, well, finding somebody to deal with it is on my board is another question. But all right, I understand.
All right, so
I mean, we could do research on it. So
All right, well, thank you, Tom, for your help.
All right, thanks. Thanks for your
All right.
votes.
Next item on our agenda is the draft and send a memo to the Conservation Commission regarding concerns over the dock at 94 Black Horse Lane. And we don't have such a draft, do we?
We do not, so I sent an email on November 19th to the zoning board. And that contained town council's opinion on the board's suggestion to draft a memo to the Conservation Commission regarding the recent decision and approval at 94 Black Horse Lane. And just in case you all need a refresher, Caroline stated the board can vote to send a memo to the Conservation Commission expressing concerns, and the Conservation Commission can give it whatever weight they deem appropriate. However, the ZBA must vote to express their concerns to the Concom so that it's not perceived as one member's opinion. So this agenda item is.
Do we have to vote to approve a specific draft, or can we just vote to
Approve the act.
send a draft, send a memo?
So what I'm interpreting is you have to vote to go forward and draft a memo before drafting it so that it's the whole board is in agreement to draft a memo.
Okay, well,
Before
I move
actually.
that we draft a memo for the Conservation Commission about the dock situation on Black Horse Lane.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Woody Chidick,
Aye.
Lee Darst. You're muted.
Thumbs up, Lee. Yep, you waved.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
All right.
Dave McMorris. Aye, Matt Watkins.
Aye.
All right. So do you want to draft it, Julia? You want me to draft it?
If anyone is willing and would like to draft it, you're more than welcome to. If not, I can draft it.
And I'll take a stab at it and then send it to you and you can circulate it.
Great.
Let's see. Unless somebody else wants to. All right, let's see. Discussion of the meeting schedule.
So you all should have received 2 draft schedules in your packets. One version is a fully remote model, which stays consistent with what you have been doing over the past year and previously. And then the second draft decision is a hybrid model. So there was discussion about doing hybrid. The only interference with the Tuesday meetings that you currently have is the select board. So the meetings would need to be switched to Monday with respect for a few other meetings that fall on a Tuesday.
Okay. Well, why don't we approve the remote model schedule? And then when and if we can do the hybrids, we'll reconsider the dates.
What would be the trigger? We say when and if? A longer discussion at our next meeting or what?
Yeah, so if, let's say, Julie, if we decided we wanted to do the hybrid models, we could start in February.
Right, because the January meeting's already scheduled.
Okay. So do we want to discuss this now or we want to discuss it in January?
If you need additional time to look it over, I think you can vote on
Yeah.
it in January.
Yeah, I don't think we need time to look over the schedule. We need to talk about whether we want to go to the hybrid model or whether we want to just stay remote.
Okay.
Could somebody describe the hybrid model exactly?
Yes, so that would be a combination of in-person and using the Zoom platform. So to my knowledge, Cassandra and I are going to get a separate laptop to be used for meetings in a hybrid format. And so we would be meeting hypothetically in the room that the select board usually meets in, which I think is the chart room at the Wilcott Commons Center. And so that way applicants or people, members of the public can attend either in remote format or in person.
But the board would always meet in person. That's the question.
Yeah, I would think unless you had some other conflict, such as a business trip, Matt's, gone to Chicago or something, you could dial in.
Yeah.
And so couldn't the applicant though too, right? Like if there's not actually, if you set up a hybrid model, the applicant doesn't necessarily have to show up in person.
Right. From past experience, there were instances where members were remote. However, I think there is a certain stipulation for the chair. I think the chair has to be in person, but I don't know if that's a positive. I'd have to look into that and get back to you.
I would vote for the hybrid system, but with a strong urge to applicants to be present in person.
Yeah, I think it'd be desirable in most cases. I think it'd be particularly great for us because sometimes looking at these 22 pages of, architectural drawings on Border Street and, 6 or 8 of this and 6 sign, sheets. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to do and it's hard to.
The other thing I'm thinking of is like, so when we had it live in person, it was a while ago. I can picture John Cavanero up there with a board just kind of pointing, and we're kind of like looking to try to see if we can see what he's pointing at,
But a lot
Some
more
parts of it
people,
remote that are easier to
people come
digest.
when we have it remote. I mean, a lot
Yeah.
more people join in. I mean,
I
the
agree. I think having the remote, the Zoom option is a real good thing.
it is a real help. And it's what, 30 degrees outside right now, and I don't have to go get in my car and drive home. So
Well,
very cozy.
You gotta tough it out, Lee. Come on.
I don't know, I mean, look at everybody, look at the applicants. You think,
No,
you're gonna want to come and when they can sit there and, and it
Well,
is very
should we not debate, but discuss this in more depth in January when we've had a chance to think of the pros and cons?
Yeah.
I certainly am in favor of hybrid, but so what? If that's got some detriment to it.
Woody, maybe you could schedule 3 meetings in this year, hybrid, to test it, to see if if it's workable. Schedule them in advance, but just to see the pros and cons, and if I don't know, just a suggestion. If again, it's been so long since we've been to an actual meeting. If we have to 2 times it doesn't work, you just say, all right, let's go back to Zoom. But that might be.
I can tell you, I will not be here live in February and March. I will be remote.
Well, I think Lee would probably prefer the
I
warmer
would.
months for that.
But that's the other thing too. I mean, I wouldn't mind going in the nicer months in the summer and things like that. But really, in this, it's
Being
cold
toasty
out.
warm in the winter.
Well, I
Yeah.
like to be right, but I think that that's an advantage, and I really think, I mean, we've done this for 4+ years, and everyone's adapted with the screens and following things, and we've made huge decisions, and I do understand everyone likes to sit at the table, but you know, sometimes I mean, for Atlantica, we had so many people online, and they participate, and if you go back to having people have to show up, I mean, I think it's
I don't think we're ever gonna go back to having people show up.
okay.
I think the hybrid is the way to go, either Zoom or a hybrid. But I don't think requiring everyone to come to the meeting is ever gonna happen again.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we aim toward having, if we're going to do hybrids, aim toward the April meeting being our first one?
Okay.
Okay.
I agree. As long as
Amen.
it's,
That sound good?
Sure.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
I like that.
All right, so that's it. Anybody have anything else they want to?
I just have a question. Did we ever get, did the man for Elm Street ever file his appeal? Because we didn't, whenever anyone did that, we got served, right?
I don't believe he has. We have spoken several times. There have been upwards of 100 emails that have been received by different department heads. I did explain to him last time that, again, I haven't denied the building permit. I just said that before I could review the building permit, that he needs to, because he's in the floodplain, he needs approval from the zoning board. So it was only that denial there. So if he's applying for, to reverse my decision, he's better off applying to the zoning board for use in the floodplain. So I suggested that he come in, and if he wants to bring his engineer and his builder, I could walk him through the process again. I just think there's a little, I don't know, was it intentional disconnect or what? But looking back at the notes in 2019, the building was declared unsafe and boarded up. So it's not an active structure. It needs to be demolished and rebuilt, but he needs to go and ask permission to do that. So we've had the same storyline, but and I did look back on the files. I think the same information was presented to him in 2019 as well, just by the letters and information. So
I think, John, it'd be imperative that nothing come to us until or unless he's got a complete package that meets our specifications. But if he has, sort of a handwritten sketch of what he thinks the building might look like, that's not, it shouldn't waste our time.
right, we did explain it. I said the zoning board has jurisdiction over the floodplain to work in the floodplain, and I could tell you how to build it, but I can't I'm not able to do that until you have approval from the zoning board.
Yeah, Jen, he also has a completely non-conforming building. So anything that he's going to do to it, he's going to come anyway.
Right, if he's gonna, yeah,
Anything.
there is, if you could, he probably has everything wrong with it, whether it's location, setbacks, frontage, height. There's just, he needs to start someplace, but we haven't got to that starting point for him yet. So,
just for the record, he has contacted my office, or tried to contact me through my office internet connection. He has called my office several times and left many voicemails. He has suggested that he wants to retain me to advise him on zoning bylaws, and he will compensate me. And I did give Julie a couple of short paragraphs of my response to him, which is, we will treat you exactly like everybody else. You'll go through the same process as everybody else. We're not doing anything informally.
Right, I told him the same thing too, and I gave him a list of the last 7 floodplain projects that have been in front of the zoning board, and that are permitted now. So I think he's aware of how the process works. He just doesn't like it. And I've also said that the board cannot make a decision or advise you off the record. They have to advise you in an open public meeting that is posted. So it's not that they don't want to, they just can't, period. I didn't go any further than that, but that's, so he seemed to be clear last time I spoke with him, which was yesterday. So we'll just have to see where it goes.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? All right. Have a motion to adjourn. I'm sorry, what?
I made a motion.
I second the motion to.
Second, all right. All those in favor, Woody Chidick,
Aye.
Lee Darst,
Aye.
Mike
Merry
Dickey,
Christmas. Happy holidays.
Aye.
Charlie Higginson,
Aye.
Dave McMorris, Matt Watkins. All right, well, it's good to see everybody, and
Good night, all.
we'll have good holidays, and we'll see you in January.
All right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Night, everybody.
Aye.
Right.
Good night.
Mm.